It's back to working with the big planks for the mantle. I've got to cut these exactly to the right length. You recall me showing you my caliper to measure the fireplace. Okay, now I'm going to cut the mantle. Now these pieces, they weigh about 83 pounds. A little too much for the structure of my compound miter saw table here. So I've taken my heavy-duty roller stand with a little shim to get this cut so it'll be perfect. And just for better measure, I've clamped the plank to the saw so that I can get a good square cut on the end. You may recall from the photograph of the rendering of what this mantle is going to look like, some wraparound pieces that go around the side of the fireplace. But if you've forgotten, here's that picture again. Okay, now did you notice that we had blocks of wood that went around the sides of the tile on the fireplace? Well, I've gone ahead and taken some of the wood from the tree and made up 3-inch thick blocks, the right dimensions. And now we're going to attach those blocks to the back of the 2 main planks so that when this is finally built, they will just wrap around the sides of the fireplace tile. Now I want to have about 1/8 of an inch of clearance between the tile and the mantle, both on the sides and along this back face here, for a couple reasons. Probably the biggest is this is going to be a 220-pound mantle, and it's going to be tough to wrestle in place, and we don't want to do any damage to the stone. So if there's a little clearance, then that'll make it possible to slide that in. I'm going to take the caliper that I made, and I've already made some marks approximately where this should go, and realize that this part of the caliper that's right up against here is the part that rested against the fireplace when I was taking measurements. And I'm going to put this caliper approximately in place and make some marks to show where the fireplace would fall on here. Now, cutting these blocks that are going to wrap around the sides of the fireplace to size is a little bit dicey because they're so small. So I'm going to just show you how I do this one cut to make the right width on the block. First, I flattened the one side using the belt sander. I have a large stationary edge sander, and so I can get one side flat. Now I'm going to cut the width, but because it's such a small block, I've actually clamped a stop block, and then I've slid my work up to the stop block, and I've clamped that in place, so it's all very stable, and I don't have to worry about this block twisting around, getting caught in the saw blade, and having an accident. Trying to fit these end pieces onto the plank so that the mantle will look right in place was a bit of a job. Probably the biggest problem is that the angle on the edge of the stone on the fireplace was not a perfect 90 degrees. On one side, our deviation was 1/4 degree, and on the other side it was somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 of a degree. Now, you say, who's worrying about 1/4 of a degree? Well, FurnitureMaker does, because 1/4 degree between here and here over that 8-inch span causes the opening between the fireplace and the wood to change. So that was unacceptable for me. I need to have this so that when you look at the mantle on the fireplace, the gap between the wood and the stone is even the entire way. So I had to I had to cut these sides at a slightly, about a half a degree off of 90. Now I've got these clamped in place so you can see how they'll fit, and you can see now how this caliper works to give me the measurement. The caliper inside here represents the wall of the fireplace, and if I run my straight edge here, I can see that my wood is going to clear by about 1/8 of an inch on each end, which is what I wanted. Now I've got to attach these pieces. It's going to be a regular glue butt joint, but I'm going to strengthen it using these devices called dominoes. These are essentially floating tenons that are fit into a slot created by a machine made by Festool called the domino machine. The domino machine allows me to make a couple of cuts, a couple of mortises, and then I can slide these in. That'll help register this piece so that it stays in coplanar with the front of the maple forever. If the wood moves a little bit, these dominoes restrict the movement and keep that edge coplanar. And the rest of the gluing is a butt joint because we have long grain on both surfaces. So that's what we'll be doing next. We'll cut the dominoes and then glue this up. Here's how the domino mortiser works. It fits onto the piece just like a plate joiner, and there's a circular bit that spins and also wobbles back and forth to make a very nice mortise. All you have to do is mark on your piece where the guideline, center guideline goes. You do that on both pieces. I did that when these were clamped together. And then you set the machine on here. You line up your guideline with the mark you made. Make sure all your adjustments are right, that your depth is correct, that the distance vertically here, you know, where your mortise is correct, so forth. And you line it up, turn on the machine, and push it on in. When you're all done, you get a very nice mortise, and I've got it set to fit exactly. You can actually make it so it's a little bit wider if you think you were off a little bit on your cut, but I'm usually pretty good at it, so I make them exact. And I'm just going to go ahead and do that right on down the line. And for the mating domino mortises on the planks, you just do the same thing. Now I'm going to glue these end blocks onto the main planks. I'm a little worried about glue squeeze out from this joint getting into this end grain and preventing the finish material from adhering properly. If you try to finish over where there's glue, it's always a whiter look to that area because the finish can't penetrate. So I've applied a little bit of this product called Waxy Lit. You can get it from Lee Valley. This is kind of a wax that you put on the edges where you don't want the glue to penetrate. It's like a release agent. It doesn't allow the glue to penetrate. And that will save me a lot of time later on after the glue up's done. Okay, now to do the glue up, first I will install the dominoes into the loose piece here. I've got a little steel rod that I use to spread the glue around inside the mortise. And then I take my dominoes and go ahead and spread a little glue on them. Insert it into the hole, into the mortise. Tap it on home. Go ahead and put some into the adjoining mortises. Okay, and now I'll go ahead and spread a little glue on the faces. And I take one of these little plastic credit card things that you sometimes get in the mail. At least you used to get them in the mail. They look like credit cards. They're not really. It's good for spreading glue though. The real strength of this joint is not the dominoes. It's the face grain, this butt joint. The dominoes are really just there for alignment, registering, to make sure that over the years as the glue lets a little amount of creep occur, that the pieces stay properly aligned. Not that the dominoes don't give strength, don't get me wrong. But a butt joint, well made, is at least as strong as the base material. I'm going to use a dead blow mallet to bring this on home. And then a couple of clamps. And I want to check my alignment. Okay, the clamps are pulling this back a little bit. To correct that, I just slide the upper portion of this face clamp, this front clamp, back a little bit, and the parallel jaws try to pull the piece in alignment. Same thing on this piece. Pull this just back a hair. That's getting better. Okay, and then we'll just let that dry. When the glue gets a little more stiff, I'll come back with that same plastic credit card type scraper and just lift it right off. I'm now preparing to cut the mortises into the two main planks that those walnut dividers will fit into. And the preparation for this step is really important. The way I'm going to cut the mortises, I'm going to use a 2-flute end mill bit in a plunge router, and we'll show you the actual cutting later. But this plunge router bit's a 1/2 inch wide, and it will cut down to about 1.5 inches into the plank, and then I'll flip the jig over and cut in from the other direction to get the full 3-inch depth. And using a router, I can then make the mortise the right size. Now, to guide the router, I've made up a special jig. It's got slots cut into it that will guide on the router's guide bearing, and or guide collar is a better description. These holes are made 1/16 of an inch large on every side to account for the thickness of this guide bushing collar. And this jig clamps onto the maple using the inside corner of this ear as a reference. Now, because this bit is going an entire 1.5 inches into the stock, and then I expect to come in from the other side and actually meet perfectly in the middle, I have to be very careful how this jig clamps on. So in making the jig, I was extremely close with my tolerances, but I also have to prepare the stock to hold the jig properly. Now, when I glued on these end ears here, you know, the glue up's not perfect, and yet I need that jig to sit perfectly. So I spent some time with some shims, that's what this blue tape is, and a little bit of cardboard, and actually tried to make these faces onto which the jig will clamp perfectly coplanar and perfectly at a 90-degree angle to the top and bottom faces. I've done that to both sides, and then I've taken my caliper and clamped it on here to make sure that I've kept my clearances that I'm going to need to get this onto the fireplace. Everything's looking real good, so the next step is to go ahead and clamp this on and start the routing. Now you can see the jig. It's clamped on in place. Here's the outlines of the templates. And I'm taking about 1/8 of an inch of bite with each pass, and then I stop, get the vacuum cleaner out, vacuum it out, and then make another quick pass to make sure I clean up, because the chips get in there and prevent the guide bushing from coming up close against the edges here. That's it. That's one complete pass. I've taken the mortise another 1/8 inch deep. They're making nice clean sides, so I think we're going to be in great shape. Since this step is so critical, I thought I'd give you even a little better look. Here's what it looks like where I'm complete with cutting halfway through 2 of the mortises. Those mortises are 1 5/8 inch deep, which is a little over halfway through the thickness of the board. So when I flip the plank over and reset the jig, I should be able to meet in the middle. You notice on those jigs there's 3 screws and 2 dowels. That's what's holding the fence in place. The idea is I can take the fence off and then I can reinstall it, basically flipping the jig over so I get the mirror image. On the plunge router, I'm using a 2 flute, see if I can get a little closer, a 2 flute bottom end mill bit, a 1/2 inch shank, and it's got 2 flutes so you get good chip clearance. I do have some 4 flute bits. Of course they're going to clog up with chips much more easily, so the 2 flute works good for this, and it makes a very nice round cornered mortise. The next step is to cut the mortises for the inner vertical pillars of walnut. So I've simply modified the jig that I used for the outer pillars using the one template hole that corresponds with where the mortise needs to be. What I did was I moved the fence so that instead of being in this axis, the fence is now in this axis, and I've clamped it against the face of the maple, and then I'll just go ahead on in with my router and end mill just like I did earlier.